Good afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sharon Grundy. I'm the Sales and Marketing BDM for Federated Farmers. I'm excited today to welcome you to the first edition of Partners Intel, a webinar designed to share and explain some of the things our strategic partners do. It's relevant and interesting on-farm information. Today we have with us Stephen Cantwell, FMG's Manager Advice Services, and Ewan Kelsall, Federated Farmers Senior Policy Advisor. I'll hand you over to Stephen to get an insight into some of the major risks on farm in the summer.
Thanks, Sharon. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Stephen Cantwell and I'm from FMG. Just a real quick introduction. I've been with FMG for almost 6 years now. Started as a rural manager in the Hardaki Plains and Coromandel and have moved since to Wellington, where I've been for about 2.5 years. And since moving to Wellington, I've been a part of our advice services team, which I'll share a little bit more with you. So on the next slide, we'll see, for those of you who don't know FMG, I'll just do another quick introduction. It stands for Farmers Mutual Group, and we've been around for 116 years, and was started by a group of farmers who were essentially just unsatisfied with predominantly UK-based insurers at the time, and they felt the premiums are too high and just didn't quite understand the risks that we're facing. So what do? Create your own insurance business, and so FMG is a mutual, and what that means is that we don't actually have any shareholders. So any profits we make, we are a profit-making business, but not a profit-maximizing business. And any of those profits we can put back into the business to improve our solvency so that we can be around for another 116 years plus, and also support things in the community, such as things like local calf clubs, sponsorship of Young Farmer of the Year, and even supporting Farm Strong as well. And one thing that I'll just point out there is the word advice there in the logo. So a lot of you will know us for the insurance, but I'll be focusing on the advice element. And that takes us to our next slide. So what we're trying to do with advice is what we call breaking the cost plus cycle. So what we're trying to do is, as time goes on, the more we claim, the higher our premiums get. But what we're trying to do is stop that rotation by giving good advice to lower the number of claims, to then lower those claims costs and stabilize those premiums. And we're able to do that because we aren't a profit maximizing business. So if we can reduce the amount of claims that we get, then we're able to stabilize those premiums, which I'm sure there won't be any complaints about. So today we're going to focus on summer risks, and we're just going to focus two in particular. And they're going to be vehicle accidents, which will cover quad bikes, side-by-sides and tractors. And the other one as well, which we'll touch on, is rural crime as well. And they'll be very relevant in terms of the time of the year. So the first one on the next slide we'll see is quad bikes, and that's where we'll start today. So on the next slide, we've got a good little graph there which shows where FMG gets all its claims from. So that green bar there is what the total cost is. So look to the left and this is over a 3-year period. So you can see there just so, and then on the right-hand side is the frequency, which is that's line. But the main thing to take out of this is that accidents seems to be the biggest problem that we do face in terms of claims. And there is a dollar attachment to that in terms of the quad itself. But when we think about where the real risk is here, and that's around people, because we can replace a quad, but we can't replace people. So that's where it's even in a more important side of things. So we've established what is the issue. On the next slide, we'll see where the issues lay. So it seems like there's a lot going on, but I'll break it down for you. We'll just look at West Coast. So on the right-hand side, you'll see a dark green line and the little 2%. That tells us that 2% of all the quad bikes we insure are in the West Coast. If we then look at the light green line on the left, that is, and the 1.1%, that shows the amount of claims that we get in that region. So when we look at West Coast, we go, that's actually looking pretty good. When we compare that to, say, Wellington, Otago, Manawatu, Wanganui, and Hawke's Bay, where we've got the red ones highlighted, that shows that they're overrepresented. So that is when that green line on the left is bigger than the dark green one on the right. And so what it's shown is that on proportion, we're getting more claims than the ones that we got insured. So we look at those regions as higher risk for that. So this is for quad bikes accidents. If you're in that area, that is just something to sort of highlight there. In the next one, we've established the what, which is the accidents, the why, the where, which is these regions, and then we look into the time of the year. So on the next slide, we'll see that we'll see a timeline of where all the claims are coming from. And so you can see here, again, there's a few lines there, but we'll break it down. So we'll start from the bottom. No, we'll go from the top. So the top there is every single, so that green line is where we get the claims, and this is over a 3-year period as well, in which month. And so that's all quads all around the country, whatever industry, sheep, beef, dairy, arable crop farmers, kiwi fruit orchardists, all there. But then we've also separated sheep and beef and dairy. And so what we want to, we can see some little bumps there along the line. So if we just look at the dairy one, we can see it's pretty high in January and also August. Sheep and beef high in January through to March. And then overall as well, we've got the high January, August and October, December as well. So when I look at this, the thing that really stands out in terms of common across those peaks is the element of fatigue. So in December and January in particular, we know there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on the farm, in our personal lives with Christmas, holidays. There's a lot sort of there to, a lot of pressures. And then when we particularly look in August, we can see that little bump there with the dairy farmers, and that, big element of that is the calving. And that fatigue element really does kick in there. That March one is quite an interesting one too for sheep and beef. I was having a chat yesterday to one of my colleagues, Blair Shortall, who's our national key account manager, and there's sort of the dry conditions, in the sort of lead up to that is, it's quite well aligned across the country that that March period is pretty dry. And what that, and this is again a theory, and always open to what others think, is that sometimes that those parts of the farm that you might not get into, be able to get to when it's wetter, do open up, and that temptation to sort of go there on a bike that might not be well fit for it is there. And that sort of changing of conditions just brings up another point, and that's around tire pressures. So we ran a series of quad bike workshops throughout the country, and one thing that really surprised me was it wasn't that uncommon that all the tire pressures were out for quads. A lot of farmers, they brought their own quads, and it's so easy for this to happen. I mean, you get on your quad every day, you don't notice any really change in your pressure. But it wasn't that uncommon that every tire had a different pressure, which not only it's bad for maintenance as well as the bike sort of works against itself, but also makes the bike pretty unsafe. And so that's just one thing to take into consideration as we're coming into summer and that ground starts hardening up. Do you have the right pressure? And just getting out there and even just checking it today is one real basic thing you can do to just improve the safety on farm. So that's quads. We'll take a look at side by sides now. So you'll see some familiarities in terms of what we're showing, and we'll sort of speed through these a little bit quicker than the quads, because you'll be familiar with some of the graphs. In the next slide, you'll see something pretty familiar. And that again is that we see these accidents are, again, the main cause. And so on the next one, we'll then look at the regions. So you'll see some familiar ones there. Again, this is the same thing, but we've highlighted the ones that are overrepresented. You'll see some familiar regions there with Manawatu and Otago there is again overrepresented. But then also Taranaki and Waikato and sort of pop up here. If you're wondering, well, why is it that they're not in quads, but they are in side by sides? I don't know the answer to that, and really encourage if you do think you've got a good theory to support that, please send it through, and we've got the information after where to send any questions. But that's one that we're still working on to get that understanding. But again, we'll go to the next slide. We'll look at the time of the year, and pretty much from now until the end of the year, doesn't matter. Sheep and beef, dairy, all the other industries, we see this real big rocket up in terms of the amount of accidents that we see in those side by sides. So again, there's this as we sort of creep into this summer period, we do see those accidents start to increase. And February as well, if you look overall, you see that little bump there in the total amount of accident claims that we get. In the next slide, we'll get into tractors now. So I'll go. The next one is again, what's a surprise? We're seeing accidents there as the number one. So there's a range of other ones like fire and tire damage too, but again, accidents are really up there. And I'll start sounding like a bit of a broken record, but I hope that's quite clear in terms of where we see a lot of those issues lying. So on the next one, we'll see the regions, and again, this is where where we can really start to think in terms of where some of these big ones is. There's the ones I've highlighted here. The West Coast, really interesting. You would have, we used that one as an example earlier on in terms of the quad bikes and side by sides. They seemed pretty well. It seemed like pretty compared to other regions. Based on claims, relatively safe. But then when it comes to tractor accidents, it does, start to become overrepresented there. Taranaki, still there too. And Southland's been a really interesting one. If you're in the past, they've been really overrepresented, and it started to creep back a little bit. And you can see there it's still overrepresented. As we've highlighted, 9.2% of the tractors insured there, but almost 12% of the claims. But yeah, it's been creeping back, but always an interesting one in terms of the fact that there is, it tends to be more tractor accidents in Southland than the standard average. And then Otago, and the big thing about Otago is it's the only region that actually has all three of the vehicles that we've discussed today being overrepresented, which is, again, quite interesting. On the next slide, we'll see the time of the year, and again, there's no accident in terms of why we've been talking about this in terms of a summer risk, and that is that we see the tractor accidents start to creep up there, particularly now in November, and it does ease off a little bit, as you can see there, but that's still a lot higher than most of the year. So again, we start to see those accident claims for tractors really start to rise there. And so I guess the thing with these vehicles is, the reason why we want to share these sort of claim insights, and we've talked about some of the reasons that it could be from going to maybe the track conditions, tire pressures, the element of fatigue, which kicks in, particularly in that summer period where the days get longer, and so you've got that the ability to more daylight hours to work harder, get more jobs in, but that's tends to be the times of the year where we actually see more of these accidents happen. But the real sort of reason why we share this is, at the end of the day, when you're on your property, your property better than anyone else. And you'll have your own ways to sort of mitigate this risk. And so, but by highlighting the fact that it is really heightened at this time, it's a really good chance, just to act on it. So what we'll do now is quickly move to rural crime. And this is another risk that we tend to see pop up in this sort of summer period. So on the next slide, we've got a breakdown in terms of the total amount that we've paid in the past 3 years. And this is just for what we call like on-farm burglary and theft. So we're not talking about someone entering your house and taking your TV. This is farm tools, things like chainsaws, tools, quad bikes, things that you use around the farm. And so in the past 3 years, $7.1 million there. But the thing that really stands out for me is that bottom one, which is the 61 on claims on average per month, just specifically for on-farm sort of items. And when you break that down, that's roughly about 2 a day. So there's 2 farms in New Zealand every day that are getting hit by someone who's flogging off some of their gear, which to me I always find quite confronting. The next slide will see the time of the year. Again, and there's that little bump there in November, but there's also the biggest month is January. And I guess it's no real surprise, the reasons why, and that's, a lot of people are, sort of out and about, it's quite a busy time of the year for, seeing family and some lucky people who get to go on holidays, and leave the property for a bit. And, that does open up for thieves to be able to get in. So that is just for the farm gear. On the next slide, we've actually got a breakdown of these are what we call domestic items. So these are more like your TVs and your appliances and things like that can get stolen. And the thing I wanted to point out here is I firstly just put in the 2021 just so you could see that big drop during April when lockdown was. But I guess the other thing to point out there is it didn't take long before the thieves to come back, and we saw by September and December that things were pretty much, that activity was pretty much back to normal. So that business really got going, and again that January really high. And so when you're sort of thinking about if there's a time to act on real crime, it's now as we're leading up to Christmas. And there's a range of things, and we encourage you to jump on FMG's website, and we can, we've got some real crime prevention information there, which we've done with Federated Farmers and New Zealand Police. There's just basic things like taking out your keys out of vehicles and parking them in the shed if possible. Get a trusted neighbour to, take out your mail, keep the lawns tidy, bring in the rubbish, or in those sort of things if you're going away. And then, hey, it's Christmas coming up, and maybe it's time to give a present to yourself, and maybe a new security camera, a high spec lock, or an alarm system for yourself to really help help the security. But one thing I'll just point out just before I pass it to you, and is, all these things, it's very easily to think about, there's the cost of the damage to the tractor or the tool or equipment that you've lost, but there's the disruption that's really where it causes issues, particularly at the moment as, supply chain issues are getting really tough. It might seem like a small thing to, have a small accident in the tractor and you're all right, you're feeling okay. But if that takes twice as long, or if extra time to get that part from overseas, and you need that tractor that week, things get really disruptive. And that even goes to that tool that you really need that week always seems to be the one that gets stolen. So the prevention's always better than the cure in this case. And so putting the effort in to try and reduce these things, might seem like an investment, but I believe it's an investment worthwhile. So I just wanted to end on that before I pass on to Ewan, who's got some great insights to support some of these numbers.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Stephen. Afternoon, everyone. My name's Ewan Kelso. I'm in the Federated Farmers Policy team, and I deal with a number of the people elements of our work, so health and safety and rural crime sit amongst those. Look, there was a real eye-opener for me when we first went through that stats with FFG, and that's why we've been so keen to get that information out to you guys to be able to see the seasonal peaks of it, and just I guess what's really happening out there on the ground. And it really tells a story that I don't think anybody else knows. So if you look at WorkSafe and ACC and the data they've got, this is a different segment again. But look, Stephen's talked about it, and I really can't emphasise it enough. There's a lot of facts and figures, numbers there, but at the end of the day, in that accident space, often if we have a vehicle accident, we're on the phone to Stephen going, how quickly can I get a new side-by-side? But at the end of the day, those can be replaced, but we can't, us and our people can't. And if you look at the stats from 2020, there was over 2,300 accidents on farm, which required more than a week off work. And unfortunately, there was also 20 fatalities during that time. So a lot of the time, we do just walk away and it's ring the insurance to get a new vehicle. But the impacts of both are just devastating on farms and on families. And we just really can't emphasise, this is the time to. Everyone's working hard, daylight hours are long. We know that there's a staff shortage and a lot of people are overworked. But we just really want to emphasise that. It's very tempting to push on into the evening and keep going, but the statistics show a lot of accidents happen at the end of the day when we're tired, and a lot of accidents happen over these peak periods. So sometimes it is better to just pack up shop and come back again in the morning and have another go. It could save you a lot of hassle in the best instance, or a lot of heartbreak in the worst. So we really want to emphasise that. And in terms of rural crime, Feds is pretty active in this space. We just did a survey with New Zealand Police earlier this year, and thank you to those of you who may have been involved and responded. And look, it's a real eye-opener for us in terms of what's going on out there in the rural crime space. So we had about 1,200 respondents who had suffered crime in the last 2 years, and of those, 600 had come back and said yes, they had, and that was about a 10% increase from when we last did that survey in 2016. So things are jumping up, and unfortunately, that wasn't the only thing on the increase. 72% of those who had suffered a crime were hit 2 or more times, and that was a bit of an eye opener for us, and I imagine for you guys too, Stephen, in terms of if you get hit, they know your way around the property, they know where your sheds are, and they can come back and they'll have another go. And anecdotal stories we hear, and police are quite common with this. The old quad or side-by-side gets stolen, and they just keep an eye on the property, and when they see the nice new shiny one turn up after the insurance claim, they'll come back and have another go and get that. And look, it's not just getting hit twice. Almost 18% were hit 5 or more times, and so these are people that are really been targeted. And unfortunately, sometimes we're not always the best at learning from these things. So almost half of farmers who had suffered a crime didn't change anything in terms of security, and 25% took 2 incidents, and 10% took 3. And so all the things that Stephen's talked around, alarms, cameras, we know that these make a notable distance to criminals. It's just too hard, or it increases the risk. And so they go and look somewhere else. In terms of items stolen, none of it will be any news to any of you. Of those people that had suffered an incident, 45% were small items stolen. So that's your chainsaws, hand pieces, bits and pieces that are pretty easy to flick on for cash and easy to carry away. And just under 30% were your vehicles. So that's your motorbikes, quads, farm utes, that sort of thing. And so, yeah, look, rural crime is a big issue, and it's getting worse, unfortunately. There were some key areas, a bit like Stephen talked about, particularly the Bay of Plenty, Wairoa area. North Otago also suffered a lot of crime, parts of the Waikato. So there are key areas that really get targeted. And look, there's a lot of parallels with having a vehicle accident. As Stephen said, supply chains are slow at the moment. It's really hard to get new gear, and so if your vehicle's gone now, it could literally be months until you get a replacement, if you can get them at all at the moment. So it's the old story, the 5 minutes to put it in the shed, take the keys out, park it away from the road where people can't see it, can make a huge difference. It means you guys can just get on with the business of farming over the summer period. So anything to add to that, Stephen, or anything I missed?
Just to reinforce that element of the chances of you being once you've had a theft on your property, that chances of it again, and when we heard that from the survey, we looked into it too, and we did see that that risk does increase to have another theft on property. But those figures that we don't always act on it is really interesting, and so if the old thing of lightning doesn't strike twice doesn't occur in this case. So if you do, if you're unfortunate to have that happen to do try and act on it, because it's all about trying to keep our community safe. If we can try and lower these levels, it works well for everyone, and provides a rural community that we all want to live in. So I always think it's worthwhile putting that investment into it.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Stephen. And probably the only other takeaway is, look, we don't need to tell you how to live in communities. Rural communities rely on each other, but we were quite surprised. It was only about a quarter to a third, I think, that were part of community groups or were actively involved. I mean, we don't know if people would consider a Facebook chat that they have that says, oh, so-and-so saw this or whatever, but get together, talk to your neighbours, keep an eye on each other, and it helps with all things, health and safety and security. So it's just another thing to think about at a busy time of year, but it could save you a lot of time and hassle long term. So, hey, Stephen, thanks heaps for coming on today. We really appreciate it. It was a lot of insight there. I understand we'll make this information available, so be quite useful for people to obviously look at their own region and grab that up and have a bit of a look. And we will put up an email address where you can send through any questions for FMG, and we'll get back to you when we can. So thanks for joining us, and appreciate your time, Stephen. Thank you.